Could you please state and spell your first and last name?
Yeah, it's Jordan Karsten, Jordan Karsten.
How are you employed?
I'm a professional consultant for the Wisconsin State Crime Laboratory's Office of Crime Scene Response, and I'm also a professor of anthropology and criminal justice at the University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh.
What does that mean, a professional consultant?
So I will assist anytime the crime lab thinks that they need help with forensic anthropology. So if there's a case that involves human skeletonized remains, if there's a case that has heavily decomposed remains, or cases where we're searching for clandestine graves, I get involved.
Briefly, can you describe your qualifications for forensic anthropology?
Yep, I have a Bachelor's of Science degree in anthropology and a Bachelor's of Science degree in health sciences from Grand Valley State University. And then I also have a PhD in anthropology from the State University of New York in Albany, New York.
How long have you worked as a professional consultant with the Wisconsin State Crime Lab?
For the past 4 years.
Do you also consult with any other investigating agencies besides the Wisconsin State Crime Lab?
Yep, so I have worked for agencies including the Milwaukee County Medical Examiner's Office, our State Department of Justice's Division of Criminal Investigation, the FBI, the Defense Department, over the course of these last 13 years.
And you stated you are also a professor. What university was that at again?
University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh.
And how long have you been a professor?
13 years.
And that's also of anthropology, correct?
Yep, anthropology and criminal justice as well.
So what, very briefly, just describe what is the study of anthropology.
Yeah, so that's a hard one for briefly, but anthropology is the study of humanity. And that includes, what it means to be human across all time and space. For that reason, a lot of anthropologists have spent time studying the human skeleton in an effort to understand human evolution over time. And we've realized that we can apply a lot of those methods in the study of the human skeleton to cases involving human skeletonized remains. And so even though anthropology is a very broad subject, my own specialty is in the study of the human skeleton.
So when you come out to the scene, what is your primary job is to identify bone or human bone?
Yep, so it depends on the kind of scene I'm called out to, but a lot of times if we are searching an area for human remains, my role is to identify any discovered items as to if they're bone at all, and then if so, if they're human versus non-human animal. So that's one big role. Another is to look for signs of clandestine graves and assist with the scientific kind of systematic excavation of those graves as well.
And what does that mean, a clandestine grave?
Clandestine grave is where somebody will attempt to hide human remains and by digging a hole in some place that's not a marked cemetery. And so we will search for those relatively frequently.
And what types of things are you looking for when you're looking for a clandestine grave?
Well, it depends. I mean, if it's a shallow grave, you might see some human skeletonized remains on the surface. A lot of times shallow graves may be disturbed by carnivore scavengers, and so we'll see human skeletal elements scattered around the surface, so we'll look for that. Otherwise, we look for disturbed earth. I will sometimes employ a ground-penetrating radar unit to look to see if I can find buried objects under the ground as well.
And what, can you describe that a little bit further, ground-penetrating radar units?
Yeah, ground-penetrating radar units are they look like little, almost like a little electric lawnmower. But what the unit does is it will shoot radio waves down into the earth. And then when it contacts any kind of object that differs in its ability to store electrical energy, some of those radio waves will be sent back up to the surface and it's registered by the machine itself. And so let's say there's a bone buried in a clandestine grave and we walk the GPR over it, because the bone varies in its ability to store electrical energy compared to the surrounding soil, then that will bounce back some radio waves and we can pick that up as a buried object.
Do you only respond to what we believe is a crime scene, or would you respond to other circumstances?
Yeah, I respond anytime law enforcement or medical legal death investigators have a death investigation that involves skeletonized remains, they believe it will. And so although I respond to events that were criminal in nature as many times, I often will respond to events too that are accidental deaths in a wooded area where somebody's not found for a long time and they unfortunately decompose and skeletonized, or other kind of situations, maybe not accidental, but potentially a suicide. So it depends. Sometimes they're not always criminal in nature. The thing that gets me involved is if they're skeletonized human remains.
And have you ever responded to scenes? You described a lot of scenes where a body is out in nature and the body has decomposed, so there's only bones left, correct?
Correct.
Have you ever responded to scenes, fire scenes, so the body has burned so that there's very little skin left on the body?
Yes, several.
So you do both of those things?
Yep, as long as the remains are skeletonized or primarily skeletonized, I'll be called in. So if the state fire marshal responds to a scene and they have severely burned human remains that maybe still have some soft tissue but are otherwise burned down to just bone or fragmentary bone, then I'm also called in to assist in those types of cases.
So sometime in June of, well, I believe it was specifically on June 26th, 2024, were you contacted by the Dodge County Sheriff's Office to respond to a scene on Wood Road in what would be the township of Kleiman, but mailing address Juneau, Wisconsin?
Yeah, I was contacted indirectly. So they contacted the crime lab for assistance, and then the crime lab's office of crime scene response contacted me to respond to the scene in the town of Kleiman.
And then did you respond to that scene?
I did.
And what was your role when you responded to that scene?
That day, I used a GPR, so ground penetrating radar unit, to examine one area of interest to investigators to see if there was anything buried. I did not find anything buried in that instance. And then I did help walk around the rest of the scene. And as people were searching the scene, some bones were found that day that I identified as being animal bone.
Did you later come back to that same scene? I guess I should say come back to Dodge County, this time in the city of Juneau, to the impound area of the sheriff's office. I believe it was on Friday, June 28th.
On Friday, June 28th, I did not. I responded associated with this same case to Adams County, where I helped in a land search where there were, my role was to simply identify any found bone as being bone, first of all, and then if it was human versus non-human animal. Do
you recall if anyone from your team was present here on Friday, June 28th, or if you just received some items that were located during a sifting from Friday, June 28th?
Yeah, there were DCI special agents who were present that day, and they sent me messages that included pictures where they asked me to identify items as either being bone and potentially human bone, if I could.
So was there another case day that you responded in June directly to the scene on Wood Road?
Yep, I believe that would have been June 29 or June 30, and that was, I was requested by the Dodge County Medical Examiner to come and excavate an area where they believed they saw a surface burn.
And on that date, can you briefly describe what you did on that day, what your role was?
Yep, I went to excavate that surface burn in an effort to see if there were any human remains associated with the surface burn that were concealed under the earth.
And we did, just for your reference, are you aware, was there a representative from the Dodge County Sheriff's Office present on June 30th during that excavation?
Yes.
And do you recall who that was?
There were several, but I know Taylor Niels, I don't know if I'm pronouncing his last name right, Niels was there.
And he has testified, but can you briefly describe what that means, excavation, what you direct individuals to do?
Yeah, so in this case, we divided the area of the surface burn up using grid squares. The purpose of that was to remove several inches of dirt from the area of the surface burn, and then each grid square would have its own sifter, so a screen of a 1/4-inch mesh, and then the soil that was removed from that surface burn was placed into the screen to sift to locate very small items of bone.
And why is it important to use that process?
To have spatial control of those remains, right? So that if we did find in a sifter any bone or any item of evidentiary value, we'd know the approximate location where it was located.
And on that date, on June, well, let me say the sifting that occurred on June 28th and June 30th, were there any human remains located?
Yes.
And did you prepare a report outlining the human remains that were located on that date?
I did.
And I'm going to show you what has been marked as Exhibit 400. Do you recognize that report?
I do.
And what is that report?
This is a report that summarizes the findings of that excavation in late June of the surface burn.
And have you also reviewed a PowerPoint presentation that sort of isolates some photos and summaries of that report?
I have.
So does that, first is 400 an exact copy of the report that you later submitted to the, did you submit it to the Dodge County Sheriff's Office or to the medical examiner's office?
I believe both.
Okay. And is 400 an exact copy of that report that you submitted to both agencies?
Yes, it is.
I would move 400 into evidence and permission to publish portions of that report to the jury.
No objection.
It'll be received and you can publish it.
So we'll just go to the first slide. It's just obviously the cover page of Exhibit 400, correct?
Correct.
And the case number there, what case number is that?
That's a Wisconsin State Crime Lab case number.
Because you are the, so it's not the sheriff's office case number because you are the consultant for the state crime lab, correct?
Correct.
And then moving to the next slide, this is the second page of Exhibit 400, correct?
Correct.
And what information is contained on this page?
It's just listing the different jurisdictions that I assisted with in this case.
And then does it also at the bottom give us the date of the report?
Yep, the date that the month that the report was submitted.
Now we have the report itself then contains a table of contents, correct?
Correct.
And then some background information, is that correct?
Correct.
That background information, is it fair to say that you just testified to a lot of that background information, how you got involved in this investigation, et cetera?
It is.
So now going on to what is page, formally according to the table of contents, page 2 of the report, what are we looking at here?
That is a fragment of the right temporal bone from a human individual. And specifically that fragment, the temporal bone is a bone that makes up the side of your head and part of the base of your head. It also includes the hole for your ear and a lot of the organs for hearing and also for balance, like your cochlea and your semicircular canals. The part of the temporal bone that makes up the base of the skull is this very large, thick chunk of bone called the petrous pyramid, and that's what's pictured on the slide.
So on the slide, and there is a laser pointer, right? I didn't want to interrupt you. Yep. So there's one end that's the laser pointer, and so if you press the red button, yep. So there's one end that is sort of white and one end that is black. Can you just sort of describe what's going on with this bone here?
Yep, so this is an image of the Petrus Pyramid. This is what would be a part of it that is inside your cranium, right, in the cavity where your brain is. And what you have is part of that Petrus Pyramid is stained black, so it's been charred. So when bone is exposed to fire of enough heat and for a long enough duration, it will undergo multiple changes to its appearance. The first change is it'll pass from the kind of off-white, that's non-altered bone that you can see on the left side of the screen, to the charred aspect that you see on the right side of the screen. Then after charring, bone will continue to actually change, and if bone is continued to be exposed to heat of intense enough temperature and duration, it will destroy the organic component of bone, and that leads to something that's known as calcination, where bone will look gray or white, and that's because the only thing that's left over is the mineral component of the bone. The collagen component's all gone, and that resulting bone looks very flaky. You don't see that in this picture. Instead, you see unaltered bone right here, and then charred bone, and then that little strip right in the middle, which is an area of transition between those two.
So now I'm going to go to the next image here, which is page 3 of your report. What are we looking at here?
Yep, so here you've got a good example of calcination that I just talked about. So right there, the one with the black arrow, that bone is, so you can see it's white and kind of white-gray and a bit chalky. That bone's been exposed to fire for a longer period of time, or a combination of that and fire that's hotter, that's resulted in the destruction of the organic component of the bone. For the rest of the fragments there, primarily you see really charred bone fragments, and they're small pieces of bone. They're, as you can see with the scale bar, kind of tiny little chunks of bone.
And then going on to our next slide here, this is going to be page 4 of your exhibit, and I think more we're discussing, just tell us what's represented on page 4.
Yep, on page 4, it's that same Petrus Pyramid that we've seen already. This was the first bone that we discovered while excavating on June 30 to excavate out the surface burn, kind of burn pit area. And yeah, this was the first one we found, and the first one that I saw associated with this case that I could say was diagnostically human.
And what crime lab number would have this been marked?
Crime lab number 16.
And And when you say crime lab number 16, the crime lab actually put markers on each bone when we found it on this date of the dig, correct?
Correct.
So I'm going to show you Exhibit 41 and 42. So you talked about gridding and then crime lab markers. So do these photos here demonstrate when we actually located and where we located Exhibit 16?
They do.
So then I'll just walk by because I think it was Tuesday when the jurors heard this testimony. Walk by both of these pictures here just to refresh their memory where we found, and I think you call this, we were calling this a burn pit, but what's the term that you learned or you used?
I used the term surface burn because rather than a pit, it was kind of an area that you could tell was ashen. There's a lot of ash and had been scraped off the surface.
And really that is a more accurate term than burn pit because this was not significantly below the ground, correct?
Correct.
We sort of commonly would say when we think about a fire pit or an area that we would sit around where there's a fire, we would use the term pit, but this was or pit, but this was all on just the surface level, and then it was removed. It didn't go substantially below ground.
Correct.
Okay, now going on to the next slide. Oh, and then those are 41 and 42 there in the slide. Going on next, this is page 5. Of your report, what are we looking at here?
So crime lab number 19 was the label applied to this. It's a very small long bone fragment. It is so small, in fact, that there's not much skeletal anatomy preserved, and so it's not possible for me to say that it's conclusively human or not. All I can say is it is bone, because you can see both cortical bone and trabecular bone here. It's the shape of it's consistent with it being from a long bone, and all that means is that the bone is longer than it is wide, like the tubular bones that make up your arms and legs and fingers and toes. But the fragment itself is so small that very little diagnostic anatomical markers are present where I could point to some shape-specific aspect and say, oh, that is 100% human.
So it could be animal, but it's not so conclusive that it is animal, correct?
Correct.
Like sometimes you're out in the field and you can look at a bone and say, oh, that's definitely a deer bone or a raccoon bone or something like that, correct?
Correct. It's just too small and fragmentary to be able to do that.
Now, the next slide of exhibit, or next slide of the PowerPoint here. Now we are looking at exhibit 21, which is, crime lab number 21, which is page 6 of exhibit 400. What are we seeing here?
So crime lab number 21 is a maxillary, so that's your upper jaw, left second molar, so your big back teeth that you grind food down with.
And did you analyze this, or?
I examined it and to recognize that it was human in the field when it was discovered. It's morphologically, the cusp pattern, the overall shape of the tooth is diagnostic as being from a human.
And you, do you consult with a forensic dentist?
I do.
And who is that forensic dentist that you consult with?
Dr. Gabriel Legros.
And he was utilized in the course of this investigation as well, correct?
Yes, I believe he did examine that tooth.
Okay. Moving on to the next slide, and this would be exhibit 48, and that is a picture of 21 in the field. Is that correct?
Correct.
And I don't know if that's your hand or someone from your team, but that would be someone just holding the tooth, showing what it looked like in the field, correct?
Correct.
And going on to the next slide, which is page 7 of exhibit 400. If we can just zoom in a bit on this and tell us what we're looking at here.
Crime lab number 22 is another very small bone fragment. Because it's so small and there's almost no skeletal anatomy preserved, it's not possible to say what bone it comes from, a specific bone, and it's not possible to say that it's conclusively human versus some other non-human animal.
You have some circles on the bottom 2 items here. Why are those items circled?
Just pointing out here, right there where the laser pointer is, that there's an area of calcination. And so that's that like most advanced kind of color change that you see with fire exposure. And then in the bottom right there is just a good example of charring on this small bone fragment.
So do we scientifically know how long it takes to get from that point of just regular bone to sort of charring and then completely breaking down the bone?
You can't say that specifically because if you vary the time or the temperature, you can achieve these kind of things. But it takes longer to progress all the way to calcination.
And longer Like hours?
Longer or higher heat, I should say.
Hours, days, weeks?
Depends on the heat of the fire.
And do you know anything about sulfuric acid?
As much as anyone who's used it household-wise. And I do know of its applications in forensic circumstances as well.
So as it applies to human flesh, can it have any impact on human flesh?
Yes, sulfuric acid is is a corrosive acid, and so exposure to human tissue will result in its destruction.
Moving on to the next slide, which is page 8 of Exhibit 400. What are we looking at here?
This is a very small bone fragment, which is from a rib, but it's so small that it doesn't preserve enough anatomical landmarks or the overall morphology of a rib to say conclusively that it's human.
And what crime lab number was this?
Crime lab number 30.
Okay. And moving on to the next photo here.
Crime lab number 31 is a small cranial vault fragment. So when we use the term cranial vault, we're talking about the big rounded structure that houses your brain. Cranial bone is kind of like a sandwich. It's got two outer, it's a spongy part that's housed in between some solid outer parts. And so you can see that in this fragment, but the fragment itself is so small that we can't conclusively say what part of a cranium it comes from. And because of its small size, we also cannot say that it conclusively comes from a human either.
So, but we can say that it comes from a cranium.
Correct.
Just not a human cranium.
And it may come from a human cranium, but we can't say that with absolute certainty.
Okay. And moving on to, so I believe I stated it, but that previous slide was page 9 of Exhibit 400, and now moving on to page 10 of Exhibit 400. This is now crime lab number 33. What are we looking at here?
This is another long bone fragment, right? So one of the bones that are tubular, longer than wide. It's pretty small. It, again, is so small it lacks enough anatomical landmarks or overall shape to say conclusively if it's human or not, or to say conclusively what bone it's from. But generally speaking, the size of it's consistent with, say, coming from a long bone like a human phalange, which is a finger bone, or maybe a metacarpal, which are the bones of your palms, or maybe toes, or the bones that arch your feet, which are all long bones and relatively smaller.
And so do we have any of that charring or evidence of burning on this bone here?
Yep, there is charring, evidence of charring that you can see right along the edges here. That part that's uncharred is a part that sits in the center of the bone during life. And then if you flip it around, you can see that the outside of it is also charred. So it's almost completely charred.
So moving on then to the next page. So this would be page 11 of Exhibit 400.
Crime Lab 34 is another small charred bone fragment. So it's, again, too small and preserves too little skeletal anatomy to say for certain where it comes from in terms of specific bone, or to say conclusively that it's human, but the bone itself is charred.
And then moving on to the next page, which is page 13, because I believe that page 12 just indicated that there was a crime lab number 36, and there was a determination that that number was not skeletal. Correct. So then we move to page 13 of Exhibit 400, which is crime lab number 37.
Yep. Crime Lab 37 similarly is a very small bone fragment that you can't classify to a specific element or say conclusively that it's human, and it's a chunk of charred bone.
And again, you use this word trabecular. Can you tell me what that means again? Trabecular? What?
The trabecular bone you can see like right there. It's a little hard to see on the screen, but it is spongy bone. So inside a lot of your bones, you have this trabecular or spongy, almost looks like spindly bone. And during your life, that's where your marrow sits. So your bone marrow and also marrow that stores fat sits inside that trabecular bone.
And then going on to the next slide. So this would be page 14 of Exhibit 400, Crime Lab number 38.
It's another small bone fragment. In this case, it lacks any thermal alterations, so no charring or calcination. But again, the bone fragment is so small, it could not be determined to be conclusively human or recognized as to a specific type of bone.
Okay. Going on to page 15 of Exhibit 400, what are we looking at here?
This is Crime Lab 39, so this is a small bone fragment, but one that we can say is conclusively human and also recognize a specific type of bone. So on the screen right there, you can see what's known as the superior articular facet of a lumbar vertebra. The vertebrae make up your backbone or spine. Lumbar vertebrae make up the very bottom part of it that for most of you are probably resting against a chair. And then it's also the very back part of the vertebra called a pedicle, and then also a little area called the mammillary process. And almost the entire little fragment is charred. The shape and size of the vertebra itself is diagnostically human.
And again, that is basically because of the nature and shape of this bone, correct?
Yep, enough bones preserved here, and in this case, several anatomical landmarks are preserved that we can use to classify the bones to a specific type, in this case, lumbar vertebra, and recognize that it's unique to our own species, Homo sapiens.
And I'm going to show you Exhibit 52, 55, 56, 57, 58, 59, and 60. These were all photos previously testified to by Lieutenant Nails. And if you could just briefly go through those, do those photos represent the bones that we just testified to?
Yep, several.
And some of them, we don't have markers in the dirt, correct?
Correct. Some of them were found in sifters.
Okay. And I'm just I'll do two at a time, walking them by the jury just to remind them. So this is 52 and 55. So which bones are we looking at here in 52 and 55?
Be number 30, I believe, in 52, and 31 and 55.
Okay. And then the next is 56 and 57. What exhibit numbers are we looking at?
So Crime Lab 33 and Crime Lab 34.
Okay. Now 58 and 59.
So 58 is 37, which is that lumbar vertebra fragment, and then 38 is a next bone, which I don't know if we've talked about yet.
Oh, I think that 37 might have been the one that was not.
Yep, 38 is a small bone fragment that we haven't been able to ID as human or to a specific type of bone.
Skip that one then. We'll do 60 here. So we'll do 59 and 60. So 38 and 39.
38 and
correct?
39, correct.
And then moving on to, I got ahead of myself there. So 16, what are we looking at here in 16?
Yep, number 37 is a fragmentary piece of a human vertebral body. So the vertebrae, the bones that make up your spine, have like a backwards part that kind of projects backwards. It connects to muscles, allows you to move your trunk around. And then the bodies of the vertebrae are what actually bear the weight of your torso. And so what we have here is a piece of a human vertebral body. The size and shape of it suggests it's either from the thoracic region of the spine, which is the vertebrae that make connections to your ribs, or the lumbar region of the spine, which is the very bottom part of your back. That bone itself is diagnostically human in terms of its morphology, its overall shape. And then it has a mixture of charring and calcination. Then beyond that, it also has a small osteoarthritic growth that's recognizable and still preserved.
And what does that mean exactly?
Typically, the older you get, the higher the probability of this, but if genetics plays a role, obviously, so does your lifestyle. But over the course of the adult lifespan, some folks will develop small bony growths around joints. And so each vertebra makes a joint with the one above it and below it. And so little osteoarthritic growths can form in those kind of situations, and one's observable here.
And then going on to, so that was page 16 on Exhibit 400, going on to page 17 of Exhibit 400.
Yeah, so on 17 you can see in the circle the actually osteoarthritic bone spur. And then also included in the container that was labeled number 37 were a whole host of small charred and calcined trabecular fragments of trabecular bone, that spongy bone that sits inside many skeletal elements. So you can see those here. And so some are white and calcined, and others are dark and charred, and it reflects exposure to fire.
And does this show the different level of exposure or at all, or?
Yeah, I mean, so if you look here, you can see a level of calcination on this bone fragment that indicates that it has reached a point where all that organic aspect of the bone has been destroyed through heat exposure, whereas the one right next to it is charred and hasn't quite reached that level of calcination. So it does show a variety of types of fire exposure here.
And at some point, what happens to the bone the longer it's exposed to fire?
Then it becomes calcined, which almost makes it chalky, because all that's left for the bone is the mineral aspect of the bone.
And can we identify the bone then just by looking at the dirt?
Well, it's usually will stay whole unless it's pulverized. And so even in this, the lumbar, the vertebral body fragment that we have here, it's still recognizable even though much of it is calcined.
And how could one pulverize a bone after the burning process?
Like in modern, commercial cremation, bodies are burned and then they're pushed apart with, mechanical equipment. And so anything that would take a highly chalky calcined bone and kind of manipulate it mechanically would be something that could, result in greater bone destruction.
Could things like a shovel do it? Would that be strong enough?
Yeah, depending on the level of calcination, yes.
Could something like a hammer do it? Would that be strong enough?
Yeah, depending on the level of calcination, yes.
Going on to page 19. What are we looking at here?
19 shows a couple of additional bone fragments. So the two on the top are a cranial vault fragment that on the ectocranial surface, which is the part that's like towards your hair, is primarily calcined. And then on the endocranial surface is charred. This bone fragment is very small. So again, we can't say conclusively what bone it's from, or even in this case that it's for sure diagnostically human, but its overall shape is consistent with it very likely being a part of a human frontal, which is the bone that makes up your forehead.
And on the side of this and the PowerPoint, so what crime lab or what container did these fragments come from?
Number 42.
And is this from the sifting from the, if you can recall, the sifting from the 30th or from the impound on the 29th?
I believe this is from the 29th.
Okay. Anything else on this slide on 19 that needs to be discussed?
Container 42 also included some small, very small bone fragments that were primarily calcined, like you can see here, and they're mostly trabecular bone. Those fragments couldn't be ID'd to a specific bone and cannot be said to be conclusively human.
And now moving on to page 20 of Exhibit 400. What are we looking at here?
On the very top are two views of a long bone shaft fragment from a larger long bone, probably something like a tibia or a femur. But again, they're relatively small and lack preservation of enough anatomical landmarks to say if they're conclusively human or even what specific bone they're a part of. But they're primarily calcined, as you can see, with the gray kind of color, little bit of charring in a couple of the corners. And then at the very bottom is also from 42 is another set of small long bone fragments that are likely from a non-human animal.
Okay. And now that concludes, fair to say that concludes the bone fragments that are contained within the report of Exhibit 400, correct?
Correct.
And then the last thing contained in Exhibit 400 are a summary of your forensic anthropological findings, correct?
Correct.
And so what were those anthropological findings as it related to the June findings?
From that surface burn, we recovered diagnostically human skeletal and dental material, the overwhelming majority of which had experienced thermally related changes to the bone, including charring and calcination.
And so were we able to say anything about the sex of the bones or anything of that nature?
The remains were too fragmentary to develop a biological profile of the decedent. So we weren't able to say conclusively that the individual was male or female. We weren't able to say conclusively how old they were at the time that they died. We couldn't say, what kind of population group they come from, if they're white or black, Asian, Native American. We couldn't say how tall they were, but we could say that there were human skeletal remains recovered from that surface burn, and those human skeletal remains had been altered substantially by exposure to fire.
Okay. And Judge, you do want me to keep going, correct? Or we're switching over to another report now, but I can keep going until...
Keep going.
Okay. So now at some point, were you requested to come back to this location in Dodge County?
I was.
And when were you requested to come back to this location?
It was in late October of that same year.
And do you recall why you were requested to come back to this location?
I was requested to come back because we had found so few remains of the decedent that we believed, or the investigators believed, that it was worthwhile to institute another search of the property in an effort to locate some of the missing aspects of this decedent's skeletonized remains.
And do you recall what specific date or dates you returned to the property?
I believe the first time I came back was October 24, and the second time I came back was October 30.
So referencing October 24, can you talk about what happened? Well, first, who you were with on that date when you came back on October 24.
Yep, on October 23, I was contacted by a Dodge County medical examiner who requested that I assist on a search of the property on the 24th. And so I drove to the property in the town of Kleiman and joined in on a systematic line search of the property where we had personnel from the Dodge County Sheriff's Office, the medical examiner's office, myself, arranged ourselves essentially shoulder to shoulder to walk across the property, disturb leaves, and look for any evidence of human skeletonized remains. And during that initial part of that search, we did find some bone, but at least initially, I was able to recognize them all as being non-human animals.
At some point, did you observe what you believe to be human bone on October 24th?
Yep. Investigators from the Dodge County Sheriff's Office called me back over to the area of the surface burn, and just adjacent to that, they had found some scattered, what they believed to be bone. After I went to that area and took a look at those scattered bones, I was able to recognize several diagnostically human skeletal elements sitting on the surface of the earth.
What, on October 24th specifically, what process was used then to collect and search in that area?
We flagged the remains, the bones that were present on the surface, and then we utilized another grid in an effort to recover those remains and see if we could find any that were depressed into the earth again and sifted through dirt that we excavated through.
And was there only one area that was gridded and searched on the 24th?
For gridded and searched, yes. And what was interesting is when I saw the scattered skeletonized remains was that it appeared to have been the type of scattering that was done by a carnivore scavenger. And near where these remains were scattered, we could see a small hole that looked like it had been dug at by some type of carnivore scavenger.
Was that significant to you for any reason?
It was to me because it was an area adjacent to the surface berm, and so it appeared that some human remains had been placed under the earth adjacent to the surface berm, and that at some point after we had left in June, carnivore scavengers located it, and it was not deep, and so they were able to dig themselves into that area and pull up human remains.
So then...
All right, this is a good place to break. Please continue.
So, Doctor, I think when we left off before lunch, we were talking about the search on October 24th. We did a similar grid search as June 30th of 2024, and we just grid searched one area on October 24th, correct?
Correct.
And it was an area that was just adjacent to the area that was grid searched on June 30th, correct?
Correct.
And then did you also return back to the scene a second time in October?
Yes, October 30th.
And then what happened on that date?
On that day, we did some additional excavation, even farther, like kind of in the areas adjacent to the areas we focused on the 24th of October. And then we also organized a large line search of the property where we had a large group of individuals walking along, shoulder to shoulder, so that we could get overlapping vision across the entire property to look for any other scattered human skeletal remains.
During the course of both of the October 24th and October 30th search, were additional human skeletal remains located?
Yes.
Now, during this search, was the crime lab response team on scene or just the sheriff's office?
Just the sheriff's office this time.
So we didn't have those green crime lab markers, correct?
Correct.
We just had orange flags at each item of significance, correct?
Correct.
And did you also prepare reports based on your findings from the October 24th and October 30th search.
I did.
I'm showing you what's been marked Exhibit 401. And do you recognize that exhibit?
I do.
And what is that exhibit?
It's the report that I prepared following our search in October.
And I move Exhibit 401 into evidence and permission to publish portions of it to the jury.
No objection.
It will be received. Permission to publish granted.
So we're looking at a little small on the screen, but is that the cover? I think this is the first page of Exhibit 401, correct?
Correct.
The cover page has that same crime lab number and then now a Dodge County Medical Examiner number, correct?
Correct.
And now this one is dated February of 2026, correct?
Correct.
And same agencies involved as the first August 2024 report. Is that accurate?
That's accurate.
Now going to the first page of Exhibit 401, what are we looking at here?
So this is the left. It's actually a big collection of bones that are fused together from a human cranium. So that includes the left petrous pyramid, so from a part of the left temporal bone, as well as what's known as the basilar portion of the occipital, which is the bone that sits directly on the bottom of your skull, and it makes up the front border of the hole that connects your spinal column to your brain. And then there's just a little bit additional occipital there. That includes a hole for the hypoglossal canal, which is a nerve that leaves your brain to go out and control various parts of your physiology.
And you said, I'm sorry, which side of the petrous pyramid? What?
This is a left. So if you look right here is a left petrous pyramid, and it's fused together with part of the occipital bone. And so in June, we had found the right petrous pyramid of the right temporal bone. So the petrous pyramid of the right temporal bone. And in this instance, we've got the petrous pyramid of the left temporal bone.
And this is page 3 of Exhibit 401, correct?
Correct.
Now going on to an image that's contained on page 4 of Exhibit 401. What are we looking at here?
So this is a couple additional pieces of the left temporal bone. So this piece right here makes up the side of your left side of your head, what a lot of people think of as their temple. This is that piece right there. And then right there is part that actually makes up the space where your lower jaw or mandible makes a connection at the temporomandibular joint to the rest of your cranium. And so that's just a couple of views of that bone. And that bone has experienced some thermal alterations. So up on the side of the head, just above the ear, you can see there's charring, but a lack of thermal alterations a little bit farther down. And then there's a little piece right here that makes up what's known as the zygomatic process of the left temporal bone, which is a little arch of bone across the side of your skull. And that is also charred. And then next to that is a piece of the parietal. It's actually two refittable pieces. So the parietals make up large parts of your cranial vault on the left and right side. Basically think of it as the crown of your head. And this is a section that preserves a piece of anatomy called the parietal foramen right there. And it connects over to another chunk of the parietal and refits. That parietal has experienced both charring and calcination on the outer part of the cranium. You can see the white part there. And then the flip side of it is right here. And that shows those refittable pieces of the parietal that are charred. And in fact, it may be a little hard to see, but there are charred soft tissue that's connected to the brain and the soft tissue covering it that's been charred and is still adherent onto those bone fragments. And then this is just one additional piece of parietal.
Now going on to page 5 of Exhibit 401, what are we looking at?
Yep, so right in the very top, right here, we've got a couple of pieces of a bone that's known as the sphenoid. The sphenoid is this bone that's kind of jammed right in the middle of your skull, but makes up part of the base of it. And sitting at the top of the base of the sphenoid is a little hole. This hole is known as the pituitary fossa of the sella turcica. And your pituitary gland sits inside of that little depression. And so that is a chunk of that sphenoid bone. It sits like right up in the middle of your cranium and makes up part of the floor of your brain. No thermal alterations there, but the breaks along the margins of it are all consistent with them occurring right around the time of death. They're not lighter in color. They look consistent with the surrounding cortical bone, and so that would have occurred around the time that this individual perished. Then on the next two, these are pieces of something that's another piece of the sphenoid, so flipped around, just one piece, but a piece of the sphenoid known as the pterygoid plate, which is a projection off the bottom of your cranium and connects to ligaments and such. And then at the very bottom is another sphenoid piece, and so that is flipped versions of what's known as the greater wing of the sphenoid. And the greater wing houses your brain, like the floor is part of your brain, and then also makes up the back plate of the wall of one of your eyes. And so most of that has no thermal alterations, but there's just a little bit on the orbital plate that is charred. Otherwise, the rest of it has no thermal alterations, but the fractures to all of these bone fragments are consistent with them occurring right around the time of death.
And what does that mean, fractures around the time of death? Does that mean, can you go into that a little bit more, how you can tell that?
Yep, in anthropology, we recognize the perimortem time period. So around the time of death is when bone will break in a way that's characteristic with it retaining its living properties. And so the bone would still have had the fluids and fats in it that it would have during life. If you take bone and wait for a really long time after death, not really long, but depends on how long the decompositional process takes, and that bone becomes dehydrated, then it will break, it'll kind of shatter in a way that's not characteristic of the way that it breaks during life. And so the breaks that we see here and the colors of the fracture margins that are consistent with all the rest of the bone that can be observed indicate that these breaks occurred during that perimortem time frame.
And then you said that just those two bones on the very bottom have charring, correct? Nothing
Correct.
else on this page?
Correct. The rest don't have any charring.
And is that an indication, I mean, number one, you said that around the time of death, but the fire itself is likely not what caused the breaks.
Correct.
Because of the lack of charring, correct?
Correct.
Going on to page 6 now, what do we observe here?
This is part of the alveolar process of the left maxilla. And so it's a small fragment. There's no charring. The fracture margins are consistent with them breaking in the perimortem time frame. And then at the very bottom, so the maxilla is your upper jaw. So this is like the back part of your upper jaw. And then at the very bottom, you've got two different views of one bone fragment. This is the bone fragment, or it's actually the left and right palatine bones, a portion of each. The palatine bones make up like the posterior third of your hard palate. If you feel the roof of your mouth, right? It's the posterior third of the hard part of the roof of your mouth. And this is right in the center of that, along a feature that's known as the posterior median palatine suture. And again, on all of these that are pictured, the fractures are consistent with occurring in the perimortem time frame.
Now, we found in Exhibit 400, we talked about a tooth that we found. I think ultimately the dentist identified that as tooth number 15. Is that at all close to where this bone is located?
I mean, approximately, I guess. But this is not a part of this posterior palate or posterior alveolar process of the maxilla. Is not a portion of it that actually had teeth in it.
Understood. Going on to the next page of 401, page 8.
Yeah, so here are three different bones pictured kind of flipped sides that are parts of your mandible or lower jaw. So at the very top this is the right ramus of the mandible, and so that's the part of your lower jaw that sticks up and makes contact with the rest of your cranium, and it has no thermal alterations at all. It does have several fractures, though, that run across it that are all perimortem fractures across the mandible. And then below it is the left mandibular condyle. So this is the part of the mandible that actually sits in your temporomandibular joint and allows your mandible to rock open and close shut. And it has a little bit of charring on the side, but otherwise the breaks are perimortem. And then at the very bottom is the left gonial angle. And the gonial angle is the very back part of your mandible that curves around. And so that one is substantially altered by fire exposure. And so on the lateral side, so the side that kind of makes up the back outside part of your jaw, it's really, really charred. And then on the medial side, it's a combination of some areas that aren't charred and areas that are charred. The fracture margins on this fracture, though, are actually charred, and so fire and exposure to fire could have resulted in the fractures that we see there. Whereas the mandibular fragments that we've got up here at the top for the right mandibular ramus doesn't have any of that charring on any of the fracture surfaces at all.
And so those fractures on figure 23 and 24 that are at the top of the page, those are also fractures that occurred close to the time of death, correct?
Correct.
Going to Exhibit 9 now on, page 9 of Exhibit 401. What are we looking at?
This is the hyoid. So the hyoid is a bone that floats and sits kind of in the anterior part of your throat area, and it attaches to a bunch of muscles in the region of your throat. And it is nearly complete, but it is missing on the left side. It's broken right where the pointer is, and it's missing that corresponding greater horn and lesser horn of the hyoid. This break, though, is not perimortem. So if you look down at figure 31 in the report, you can see that the fracture margins along that break are really light in color compared to the rest of the hyoid, and that indicates that they happened post-mortem. And so most likely the hyoid was fractured by scavenging carnivore.
And now going on to page 10 of Exhibit 401, what are we looking at here?
Yep, this is the ossified thyroid cartilage. So in life, you have a bunch of cartilage that sits in the anterior part of your throat, kind of by your Adam's apple. And with advancing age, this cartilage can ossify or turn to bone. And in this decedent, it did. And we can see that ossified thyroid cartilage from a couple of different angles.
And is this charred or burnt in any way that we can see here?
No thermal alterations were observed on this.
Going on to page 11 of Exhibit 401.
Yep, so this is the manubrium. The manubrium is the very top part of your sternum. So like right about where the knot of my tie is where the manubrium sits. It makes connections with your clavicle and some ribs. And so sometimes those connections, which are normally cartilage, can turn to bone. And so in this individual, the manubrium, which is bone, this is all manubrium here, those connections to the first rib actually turned to bone and ossified. They look like the little projections or horns off the manubrium. And then when you look at some of that ossified cartilage for the connection of the first rib, you can see actually on the very bottom that the fracture margins there are pretty light in color. And then if you look really carefully right here, if I can get my hand to stay steady enough, right there, there's a conical puncture mark. And that conical puncture mark is produced by scavenging carnivores and their canine teeth. And so when they scavenge bone and their teeth come into contact with the bone, they'll make these little punctures. And so it provides good objective evidence to the fact that these bones had been scavenged by a carnivore and scattered around the property.
And for the record, he was lazing in an area at the top of the bone represented in figure 36.
Right
36. Or I guess it would be
Right, 36.
about halfway up the bone. It's a dark black mark about halfway up the bone in figure 36.
Going on to page 12 of Exhibit 401, what are we looking at here?
This is the left clavicle, or what most people think of as their collarbone. This is the center part of it that's towards your sternum. And so it's broken, so you don't have the whole clavicle that extends, from the center part of your torso out towards your shoulder. So it's just that medial or kind of central portion of it. But its fracture margins are, the color is consistent with the surrounding cortical bone, and they're consistent with being perimortem fracture.
And so is there any way to tell what could have caused the fracture of this bone? You say perimortem, so close to the time of death, correct?
Yeah, around the time of death. It could have been something like blunt force. It's hard to say because there's not very much that's preserved there.
And then going on to page 13 of Exhibit 401.
Yep, so this is a similar portion of the right clavicle. The right clavicle has just a little bit of charring on the very inferior side. And then its break is likely post-mortem. And so you can see the fracture margins there are really light in color where it's broken. And so that suggests that it was broken well after the time of death, after this bone been exposed to soil and other kind of staining mechanisms in the surrounding environment.
And sorry, going back to page 12, the left clavicle, did the left clavicle have any charring or thermal alterations?
It did not.
Page 14 of Exhibit 401, what are we looking at here?
This is the first cervical vertebra, which is also known as the atlas. So the bottom part of your skull sits on top of this vertebra, and it allows you to rock your head back and forth like this, if you're saying yes. And we only have part of it. So it's just the anterior portion of the atlas that's preserved. And then where it's broken, the fracture margins are light in color, so it indicates it's a post-mortem break on here, which was likely produced by the scavenging carnivores.
Is there any charring or thermal alterations on this?
There are none.
So does that tell us that this was either not in the fire or not in the fire long enough to have significant charring?
Yeah, there's no evidence that this bone fragment was ever in fire.
So going on, let me ask you this. Is there any way to tell whether bone had ever been exposed to a chemical like sulfuric acid?
Through chemical testing.
Did we ever do that type of chemical testing on these items?
I believe samples were taken, but if it was carried out by chemists, I'm not aware.
Okay. Going on to page 15 of Exhibit 401.
Yeah, this is the axis, so that's the second cervical vertebra. It sits right under that last one that we just saw. It's also partial. It's just the kind of anterior most part of this bone. It has a feature, it's called the dens right there. The dens is like a pivot point, and so it allows you to shake your head left and right like this. And so that's preserved here. On the posterior side of the body of this, there is a little bit of charring on this bone, just a little bit. The fracture surfaces on this they have a color that's consistent with all the surrounding cortical bones. The fractures appear to be perimortem.
So before death?
Or around the time
of death.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. And just to clarify, everything so far that we have talked about in Exhibit 401 all the bones in Exhibit 401 from October are all conclusively human.
Yep, so far every one of these is conclusively diagnostically human.
Going on to page 16 of Exhibit 401, what are we looking at here?
So these are a couple of cervical vertebra fragments. So the cervical vertebra, the atlas and axis are part of that. So when we talk about cervical vertebrae, that's the vertebrae that make up your neck. So this is a body of one that comes inferior underneath, at least the axis. And so you can see the body of it here. This is the weight-bearing portion of a vertebra. And so that's going to bear the weight of your head in your neck. And that vertebra is thermally altered. Almost all of it is charred. And then there's a smaller cervical vertebra fragment here that has essentially just very, very small bit of charring, but is mostly thermally unaltered.
And can we tell, is there any breaking or fracture margins in here that we can say anything about conclusively, or because of the charring we cannot?
For this one, it's all charred on all the fracture margins. And so those fractures may have occurred because of exposure to fire. On the lower cervical vertebra, some of that has kind of lighter margins and could be taphonomic in origin, or so it's happened post-mortem.
Page 17 of Exhibit 401, what are we looking at here?
These are two fragments of a thoracic vertebra, so the vertebrae that make up the part of your chest where your ribs are. And so at the very top is a piece of a thoracic vertebra that's known as a transverse process. It's the actual part of the vertebra that reaches out and makes a connection with the rib. And so it is charred, especially on its medial side. And so but the breaks appear perimortem. They could be due to exposure to fire. And then at the very bottom is a fragment, again, of a thoracic vertebra. It's what's known as the lamina and the inferior articular facet, so part of it that makes a connection to the vertebra that's underneath it. And it's also completely charred, including on the fracture margins, so likely broke as a result of exposure to fire.
And again, conclusively human, these bones.
All of them, yep.
Going on to page 19 of Exhibit 401, what are we looking at here?
So here are three different ribs that were recovered. This one's the left second rib, and it actually retains just a little bit of costal cartilage, which is cartilage that would make connection onto the sternum. It is not thermally altered. Then down on figure 55 is a left rib, I believe. And that is another left, it's a left rib. And so it's almost completely preserved, but has fractures along the anterior, or kind of towards the front of the chest and posterior parts, with just a little bit of charring towards the posterior end. And then the last one's another rib fragment that also has charring along some of its fractured surfaces. And so likely fractured through exposure to fire.
Now, again, these bones were not marked with those crime lab numbers, so we can't match up sort of photo to photo like we did before, but some of the bones are so distinct that it is, we can match up some of them. So I'm going to show you Exhibit 219. And tell me, are any of the bones shown on that page displayed in Exhibit 219?
They are.
And just which bone is that we can see on 219?
You can see the manubrium. You can see a couple of the rib fragments as well.
And the manubrium we talked about earlier, correct?
Yep, it's the very top of the sternum.
And this is from, according to the marker here from the sheriff's office, this would have been located on the 24th, correct?
Correct. In fact, I think that's right next to or even part of the hole of that had been disturbed by the carnivores.
And I'll just show the jury Exhibit 219. And we talked about all the figures on this page, correct?
Correct.
Now going on to page on page 20, what are we looking at here?
This is a small rib fragment. It's so small it's now possible to estimate or assess what side of the thorax it comes from. But it does have a fracture that is charred on one side.
So going back to the ribs that we saw here on page 19, so we have a fracture. Tell me again, there's a fracture that was caused
By fire in the circle, you can see. And then you've got other fractures that are potentially caused by some carnivores. And then others that are likely to be perimortem based on their jagged edges and the fact that they have colored bone that is consistent with surrounding cortical bone.
So, is it likely that these bones were in the fire at some point before they were buried?
You can only say that for the charred rib.
The charred rib.
Yep.
The other bones, we can't say that. But at least the one on the very bottom, Exhibit 57.
Correct.
Okay. Going on to 20. We talked about that already, correct?
Correct.
Now going on to page 22 of Exhibit 401. What are we looking at here?
Yeah, so this is a tibia. It is a left tibia, but it's been really substantially altered by scavenging, or I should say gnawing rodents. And so if you look, it's a little hard to see, but right here, there's a whole bunch of parallel striations along this bone. So like right here, you can see those parallel striations. Right here, you can see the parallel striations. Those are caused by rodents. Rodents have continuously growing central incisors, and so they look for hard things to gnaw on to wear those central incisors down. And so they will oftentimes take bone and use it to kind of wear down those incisors. And so rodents had really substantially altered this bone fragment through the process of gnawing. All over it, to the point where it's altered the overall kind of shape of the bone.
And just for the record, where you were pointing at was the middle of the middle of figure 61 on page 22 of Exhibit 401,
Yep.
and then on the outside left edge, correct?
Correct.
And then anything else contained in Exhibit 63, 64, 65, and 66 that is significant?
Yeah, on 63 and 64, there's striations along this bone, and basically a straight cut that are indicative of cut by a saw.
And were we ever able to conclusively match that up to any type of saw?
Not that I'm aware of, but the one thing I would add is that this bone has been altered extremely substantially by the rodent gnawing. And so it's not possible to say conclusively that this is human.
So then going on to page 23 of Exhibit 401, what are we looking at here?
It shows a destroyed end from on that one end of the tibia, and then that cut end with the striations.
Is that the same bone that we were looking at on page 22?
It's the same bone, yep.
Okay. And is it fair to say that there was not further exploration done into this because we would have to test to see if it was conclusively human? It could have been some other type of bone. The family had animals and things like that, so we'd have to do further testing to really dive into this bone, and given the amount of evidence that we had, we didn't do further analysis. Is
Correct.
that fair?
Yep, that's fair.
Going on to exhibit, or page 26 of Exhibit 401, what are we looking at here?
These are small fragments that come from, most likely from a human femur, so bone of the thigh. And so these are fragments that would come from the shaft of that bone. Unfortunately, they're fairly limited in terms of their size, so saying that they're conclusively human is not possible. They've also been, like the last bone, significantly altered by rodent gnawing activity. You can see that all along these edges, which has removed a whole bunch of the bone, even from these relatively small fragments. So this bone fragment here, that's very likely femur, just based on its overall shape and size, is also calcined in terms of, it's almost completely calcined across all of its surfaces with some areas of charring through exposure to fire.
And we testified about this before lunch. There's no way to know how long this was in the fire, correct? Because we'd have to know how long it was burning and how hot the
Yeah,
fire
not a
was.
specific amount of time, could not say.
Going on to page 27 of Exhibit 401, what are we looking at here?
Yeah, these are additional long bone fragments that are calcined and charred.
And can we tell what part of the body these come from?
They're likely from femur or tibia,
Can we say that these are human?
not conclusively.
And then page 28.
Additional charred and calcined bone fragments.
And can we say what part of the body these come from?
For these, they're also probably long bone fragments, but we cannot say conclusively the specific spot.
And I just want to show lots of photos in this case. I'm not going to show you every one from the scene. I just want to go through a couple. So we'll do 21, 221, 222, 227, 228, 231, and 234. Start with these. If you can start with 221 and 222 and just tell us what we're looking at there.
Yep, 221 appears to be that first bone that was featured in this report, which is that combined left petrous pyramid and occipital piece. And 222 is what appears to be a rib fragment.
And were you present?
Along with some additional bone fragments, excuse me, with the maxilla, clavicle pieces, and rib pieces that are also visible, as well as the hyoid.
And were you present when those bones were located there?
I was.
And those are contained within your report?
They are.
I'll first show those. The jury previously observed these, but I'll just show them again to refresh their memory. And these were located, I believe, on October 24th, correct?
Correct.
And then going to 227 and 228.
227 appears to be the right ramus of the mandible fragment. And 228 is tooth fragment.
And I think this tooth fragment was not in your report. I think that was given to
Dr. LeGros.
Dr. LeGros promptly before your report was written, correct?
Correct.
So again, showing 227 and 228. Were you present though when 228 was located?
I was.
This was also on October 24th, correct?
Correct.
.231 and 234. What are we looking at here?
231 is a bone fragment, calcined bone fragment.
Was that contained in your report, 401?
Yes. Yes.
And then 234?
And 234 is a non-calcined bone fragment. Oh, it's part of the temporal bone. So it's the left temporal bone, including the glenoid fossa, which was also contained in my report.
And then these were on October 24th as well, or?
Yes, correct.
And then final scene photo, what are we looking at here in 236?
236 is showing the outline of the hole that these bones have been placed into and from which carnivore scavengers removed the bones that were the subject of this report.
And Detective Rolfs testified about this a little bit, but can you just talk about a little bit more why we dug sort of as deep as we did?
Yeah, you can, through looking at the layers of the soil, see where there's a disturbance. And so we looked at the layers of the soil are called the strata of the soil. You can see where they're disturbed and mixed together versus where they're not. And we could find the outline of the hole with that, along with just recognizing the presence of disturbed, loose soil versus compact soil.
Probably, unfortunately, you have more experience with these type of holes than you care to. Is that accurate?
Yes, I've dug more of those than I can count.
And that's Exhibit 236, just showing that to the jury. Now, have you also prepared two diagrams in this case known as the homunculus?
I have.
And we'll start with the final, I believe is the final page of Exhibit 401. Yes, it's the final page of Exhibit 401. What are we looking at here? And if we can just zoom in maybe a little bit on this. What does this represent?
This is showing the bones that were recovered and if they were thermally altered. So yellow bone is bone that was recovered and is not thermally altered. Black sections that are highlighted there are bones that were recovered that were charred. And the kind of bluish gray color are bone sections that were recovered that were calcined.
And to be clear, do we believe that all of these bones are likely from the same body?
Yes.
We only did DNA testing on one bone, correct?
Correct.
But why do we believe they're all from the same body?
All found in the same location in the same context.
And are there any duplicate bones that we were able to locate?
There were none.
And then you prepared a second homunculus, correct?
Correct.
Which is marked Exhibit 402. And of course, I don't know. And this is the second homunculus that you prepared, correct?
Correct.
And what is that second homunculus?
The second homunculus is just a close-up view of the cranium and the bones of well, I should say skulls, because it's the cranium and mandible. And it's the same level of information. It's yellow for bones that were recovered and had no thermal alterations. kind of the dark gray for bone that was recovered and was charred, and then blue for the bone that was calcined.
And I would move Exhibit 402 into evidence and permission to publish.
No objection.
All right, go ahead.
Again, that's the same, basically what's represented in the previous one, but more a close-up of the skull, correct?
Correct.
And it shows the underneath portion, correct?
Correct.
And which of these bones here were broken around the time of death?
Most of the ones that are yellow, the ones that you see in the skull that are yellow, so thermally unaltered, have evidence of perimortem fracturing. So the ones that are gray and blue on there, which are the bones that are charred and calcined, were at least very likely broken by exposure to fire. But the rest of these bones show no evidence of that, and their fractures are perimortem.
And have you ever responded to scenes that or known gunshot wounds?
I have.
And is the fracturing of the skull here consistent with the fracturing of the skull that you've observed on known gunshot scenes?
It would be consistent.
And the injuries, or the bone fragment that we located and the injury to the skull, the individual that experienced these injuries, would they be deceased?
Yes, I think that is a reasonable assumption.
And is it fair to say that their brain basically would not remain in the skull with these types of injuries to the skull?
You're correct.
I don't have any other questions.
Cross.
Good afternoon, Doctor.
Good afternoon.
You indicated that you're a consultant with the Wisconsin State Crime Laboratory,
Correct.
and then you're also a professor at UW-Oshkosh,
Correct.
and your specialty is anthropology or forensic anthropology.
Correct.
Okay. You're not involved in determinations in this case as far as the manner or the cause of death?
This is not the role of a forensic anthropologist.
That would be more of a role for a pathologist?
And medical examiner, yes.
Okay. And that was not your role in this case?
Correct.
Your role in this case primarily was just to identify what bones on scene were human or possibly human versus animal.
That, and also document the thermal alterations and any kind of fracturing patterns as well.
Okay. I don't have any other questions.
Redirect.
Based on your training and experience, first of all, so the jury understands, what's the difference between a pathologist and a medical examiner?
Well, some forensic pathologists are medical examiners, but forensic pathologists are individuals who hold a medical degree, and for a forensic pathologist, their focus is in understanding what happened to somebody in terms of causing a death outside of the care of a physician.
So would a forensic pathologist, a medical doctor, typically get involved in a case? There's some exceptions to the rule, but would they typically get involved in a case when there was not a full intact body?
For me, typically, it would be an anthropologist only.
So it would be difficult for a pathologist in a case like this to become involved to make a determination for manner of death.
They can become involved. It depends on what's recovered.
Nothing else, thank you.
Nothing further.